is the whole kind of question of measurement and measurement theory, and how you know when you've got a good measurement of things. I think to some extent, some of the other social sciences tend to assume that things are good measures rather than demonstrate it. So one of the things that tends to be characteristic, like psychological measures, more frequently have like lots of questions, or like sociology measures often have like 1 to 3 questions. There actually are some 1 to 3 question measures that are quite good in terms of their measurement properties. But then there are others that aren't so good. So we get an idea in our heads, and we're interested in something like, I've been interested for a number of years in coping in various ways, and so you try thinking about, what kinds of coping are you interested in? I mean, some people try to cope with things by active coping and problem solving and stuff, and other people try to cope with problems by avoiding them as much as possible. Hardly ever works, by the way. There's no Reader's Digest proverb to the effect that the only things that get better if you ignore them long enough is snow and adolescence. They eventually go away. Takes a while. And you have to be really good at ignoring. And we think, although in fact our measurement of this is elusive so far, we think that there's also a sort of positive coping style that isn't active problem-solving coping. That there's something like an acceptance style of coping that, for lots of different reasons, we think really ought to be out there. So you look around to see what kind of measures are there, and think about what kind of properties you look for in measurements. And one of the things that people look for in measurements is if you think that what you're looking for ought to be stable over time, then you want the measurement to be stable over time. Now, one mistake I see actually made quite a bit in psychological measurements of different sorts is sometimes you actually have a measure that you don't want to be stable over time, and the people developing it still brag about how good the test-retest correlation is. And one of my favorites, this is a very widely used measure. Spielberger's state trait anxiety inventory has both a state anxiety component and a trait anxiety component. Now the trait anxiety component, because it's a trait, ought to stay stable over time. The state anxiety component, you really don't want to be that stable over time. If you look at the manual, they brag about how high the test-retest correlation of the state anxiety measure is. And in fact, the state anxiety test-retest correlation is just about equal to the trait anxiety test-retest correlation, which really shouldn't happen.
Does that mean it's like they're testing the same thing without realizing
You
it?
think, I mean, it's not state anxiety if it's the same across long periods of time.
So one's about being constantly in an anxious state, the other's about being having like one state of anger.
I mean, think about yourself and people that you know well. I mean, everybody gets anxious some days. You're more anxious, maybe even sometimes in the day, more anxious than others. And then some people, but along with that, I mean, everybody's varying day by day. But some people are varying day by day up here, and some people are varying day by day down here. And so trait anxiety is kind of like, where's your typical level? And as an individual difference variable, do you tend to be anxious kind of all the time, or are you sort of like, semi-comatose all the time, or somewhere in the middle? And you probably also get some sense of like how widely people vary from day to day. Would be a thing. If you have another issue would be like if you have a multiple item measure, and this is what mostly gets reported in almost all the gerontology literature, is people for reliability have gone to measures that assess how much, I think there's a way to say this in English rather than statistics. In statistics, it's how much shared variability is there among the items in your measure. Because if you've got a 10-item measure and they're all part of the same measure, they should all correlate together. So when you have multiple things correlating together, what you see reported is Cronbach's alpha, and the higher it is, the more they tend to all move in the same direction at the same time. Which, would be a desirable thing. And then you look at, when you're developing a measure anyway, you try to look at some evidence that it measures what you want it to measure. So does it correlate, if there are other variables, does it correlate with other variables that it makes sense for it to correlate with? If you're really doing this a little more sophisticated, you also look to see if there are variables that it really shouldn't correlate with, and that it doesn't correlate with those. And then if you don't have other measures, you look for like other kinds of judgments, so you look for like expert judgments, or maybe you get people around the person to say like, well, how anxious do you think so-and-so is? So you get other people's judgments and so forth. There are various ways of honing in on that. Now, at this level, and then I'll come back to it again at the end, we're just talking about the measures, and even here, there can be questions about whether measures are measuring what they say they measure. For example, and I've used this measure in almost all of my research. We use it routinely over at the Tingsted Older Adult Center as a screening device, because it's okay for lots of things, but the CESD, the Center for Epidemiological Studies Depression Measure, is one of the most commonly used short self-report inventories, which almost everybody assumes measures depression. But it turns out that, in fact, the CESD also correlates with anxiety measures about as well as it correlates with depression. And if you go back and look at the article, if you actually read, this is also like good advice for when you get into a field of study or you're wanting to sort out a program or policy issue in some depth. Go back and read the original papers on stuff if you're interested in measures, because there's an article that everybody cites Radloff and Terry for using the CSD with older adults. If you actually go back and read that article, they do report that the CSD is higher in clinically diagnosed depressed people, but they also report how much higher it is in people with other clinical diagnoses. And it actually turns out to be highest in people who don't have a clinical diagnosis but who have marital problems. And it's actually, the scores are actually higher in some of the non-depressive diagnoses than they are for people with clinical depression. So it's my view, take with everything I just told you, is it's probably a pretty decent measure of emotional dysphoria. It may even be a really good screening tool for determining whether people need more of a clinical diagnostic workup. Do you want to use it as a substitution for clinical diagnosis of depression? Probably not. Do you want to say that people who are above a certain score on it, which is what we do with it all the time, are clinically depressed? You really shouldn't. Because if you go back to Radloff's original paper, the way she picked the scores that everybody uses is that was the upper 20% of the distribution that she did the original study on. It's not hooked to clinical diagnosis or clinical risk. She just said, well, who would you want to do more diagnostic work on? How about the upper 20% of the distribution? So then we do studies where we discover that if you give this to a lot of people, 20% of them are clinically depressed. You're just replicating the original study in terms of the cutoff. Anyway. So don't, I've learned over the years from my colleague in psychology, Margie Gass, to refer to this as a nominal fallacy, nominal for name and fallacy. Don't assume that measures measure what they say they measure. Another kind of intriguing example to me that pops up in some of the gerontology psych literature is the Rosenberg self-esteem scale, which both just looking at the items and then looking at what correlates with, is probably another depression measure. And then people keep doing studies that show, well, self-esteem is linked to depression. It's in the same measure.
I'm reading a lot of articles, too, that are just, the authors are just abbreviating the measures that are already maybe only 20-item scales and making them 6-item scales. And they're doing the same things, making, finding for prevalence of, quote, major depression, using DSM as the criteria.